The quantum communication array deep within Luna Station hummed with an unusual frequency that made Senior Communications Officer Elena Vasquez pause mid-sip of her coffee. In her 12 years monitoring the deep space channels, she had never heard anything quite like the desperate, multi-layered signal now flooding through their receivers. "Commander Hayes, you need to see this," she called across the bustling command center. Her voice cutting through the usual chatter of routine space traffic control. Commander Marcus Hayes, a weathered veteran whose gray temples spoke of decades spent among the stars, approached her station with measured steps. The urgency in Elena's tone was unmistakable, and in their line of work, urgency usually meant trouble. "What have you got, Vasquez?" Elena's fingers danced across her holographic interface, isolating the signal and running it through the translation matrices. "It's a distress call, sir, but not from any human colony or ship. The linguistic patterns, the transmission frequency, even the quantum signature, it's completely alien." The command center fell silent as Elena played the translated message over the main speakers. The voice that emerged was melodic yet strained, carrying undertones of desperation that transcended species barriers. "This is High Counselor Zephyra of the Althean Republic, transmitting on all emergency frequencies. Our worlds are under siege by the Void Hunters. 13 colonies have fallen in the past solar cycle. Our fleets are scattered, our defenses crumbling. We have detected sentient broadcasts from this sector and make this plea to any civilized species within range. We offer tribute, technology, anything of value in exchange for military assistance. Our children hide in the depths of our cities while death reigns from above. Please, if any beings of conscience receive this message, we are the third system from the blue giant star your instruments. May catalog as designation J7742. Time runs short." The message repeated twice more before fading into static. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. "Ma'am," came a tentative voice from the junior communications technician. "We're receiving similar distress calls from at least 6 other star systems in that region. Different languages, different species, but the same enemy, something called the Void Hunters." Commander Hayes rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. In his experience, space was vast and largely indifferent to the struggles of individual species. The galaxy had seen countless civilizations rise and fall without interference from their neighbors. But something about the desperation in that alien voice stirred something deep in his chest, the same protective instinct that had driven him to join the Colonial Defense Force 30 years ago. "Elena, how long would it take to get this information to Earth Command? Real-time quantum burst transmission would put it on Admiral Morrison's desk in about 6 hours? Do it. Flag it as Priority Alpha. Include all the distress calls and our preliminary analysis of the enemy force composition." As Elena began encoding the transmission, Hayes found himself staring out at the stars visible through the command center's viewport. Humanity had only recently joined what they had discovered was a surprisingly crowded galaxy. Most species they had encountered were either significantly more advanced or had chosen isolation after achieving interstellar travel. Few had shown any interest in the young, aggressive species from the third planet, orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. What these aliens didn't know, what none of the galaxy's established civilizations seemed to understand, was that humanity had evolved on what xenobiologists politely termed a high-stress environmental world. Earth's gravity, weather patterns, geological instability, and particularly its diverse and often deadly ecosystem had forged a species unlike any other in the known galaxy. While other intelligent species had evolved on worlds that were merely challenging, Earth was what the galactic community had begun to quietly refer to as a death world, a planet so inherently dangerous that its native species developed capabilities that bordered on the supernatural by galactic standards. The transmission to Earth Command included not just the alien distress calls, but Elena's detailed analysis of the enemy forces. The Void Hunters, based on the scattered reports from surviving alien vessels, appeared to operate with a hive mind mentality and technology focused on overwhelming numerical superiority rather than individual unit effectiveness. Their ships were described as swarms of locusts that devour everything in their path. Admiral Sarah Morrison stood before the Emergency Council at Earth Command Headquarters, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she addressed the collection of humanity's finest military minds. The holographic display showed the star systems in distress, red indicators marking each world under attack. Ladies and gentlemen, we face a situation unprecedented in human history. Multiple alien civilizations are facing extinction at the hands of what appears to be a species that views conquest and consumption as its sole purpose. Defense Secretary Collins, a portly man whose political acumen had earned him his position rather than military experience, shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, with respect, these aren't our allies. Hell, most of these species have barely acknowledged our existence since we achieved FTL travel. Why should we risk human lives for people who've shown us nothing but indifference? Morrison's steel-gray eyes fixed on Collins with the intensity that had made her legendary during the Martian liberation. Because, Secretary Collins, it's the right thing to do. But more than that, it's the smart thing to do. She gestured to the display, which zoomed in on the Void Hunter fleet movements. Intelligence analysis suggests that these Void Hunters operate on a pattern of total consumption. They don't just conquer worlds, they strip them bare of all resources and move on. Based on their current trajectory after they finish with the Althean Republic and their neighbors, the next region with significant resources is the outer rim of human space. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We have two choices, Morrison continued. We can wait for them to finish consuming our potential allies and then face them alone. Or we can act now while we still have others to stand beside us. General Rodriguez, commander of the Colonial Marines, leaned forward. What kind of timeline are we looking at for mobilization? The Third Fleet is currently conducting training exercises in the Proxima sector. They could be repositioned within 72 hours. The Fifth Fleet finished their refit last month. They're combat ready. Combined, we're looking at roughly 400 vessels of various classes. Secretary Collins looks skeptical. 400 ships against what the aliens are describing as massive swarms. The Altheans mentioned their entire fleet was scattered. These are civilizations that have been spacefaring for thousands of years. Admiral Morrison smiled grimly. Mr. Secretary, I don't think you fully understand what we're bringing to this fight. The Altheans and their allies evolved on what our xenobiologists classify as garden worlds, low gravity, stable climates, minimal geological activity, and ecosystems with relatively few predator species. Their combat doctrine is based on technological superiority and defensive formations. She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle in the room. Humanity evolved on a planet where everything, from the weather to the wildlife, was actively trying to kill us on a daily basis. Our combat doctrine isn't based on defensive formations. It's based on controlled violence and aggressive tactics that most galactic species would consider suicidal. What they call swarming tactics, we call Tuesday. The meeting continued for 2 more hours, with logistics officers calculating supply lines, intelligence specialists analyzing enemy movement patterns, and communication experts working on protocols for coordinating with alien forces. But the decision had been made in those first few minutes. Humanity was going to war. The mobilization began immediately. Across human space, military bases burst into activity as personnel received deployment orders. The Third and Fifth Fleets began converging on the staging area at Kepler Station, their combined force representing the largest military deployment in human history. But it wasn't just the military that responded. Human nature, forged in the crucible of Earth's harsh environment, had always included a protective instinct toward the innocent and a fierce response to bullies. When news of the alien distress calls leaked to civilian channels, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Cargo haulers and civilian transport vessels volunteered to carry supplies. Mining operations in the asteroid belt increased their output to provide raw materials for emergency ship repairs. Engineering firms offered their services to upgrade human vessels with any alien technology that might prove useful, most remarkably. Thousands of human civilians with no military training whatsoever attempted to enlist for what the media had begun calling the rescue fleet. These volunteers had to be politely turned away, but their willingness to travel across the galaxy to help people they had never met spoke to something fundamental about the human spirit. As the fleets prepared for departure, xenobiologists and first contact specialists worked around the clock to understand the species they were racing to save. The Altheans appeared to be a peaceful, highly intellectual civilization that had focused their technological development on art, philosophy. The Althean system materialized around the human fleet like a vision from a nightmare. What should have been a thriving hub of civilization now resembled a cosmic graveyard, with the twisted remains of alien vessels drifting between the planets, like metallic ghosts. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, her experienced eyes taking in the tactical display that showed the system's devastating state. 3 of the 7 planets showed clear signs of orbital bombardment, their once blue atmospheres now choked with smoke and debris. "Sensor report," she commanded, her voice carrying the calm authority that had made her legendary among the colonial fleet. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Chun from the sensor station, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The Void Hunter fleet is ... substantial. Initial count shows over 3,000 vessels of various sizes, concentrated around the 4th planet." Morrison felt her jaw tighten. 3,000 ships versus just over 400. The odds were significantly worse than intelligence had predicted. "Any sign of surviving Althean forces?" "Yes, ma'am. There's a small cluster of ships maintaining a defensive position around the 7th planet near the outer asteroid belt. Roughly 24 vessels, but their energy signatures are weak. Looks like they're running on minimal power." Captain Santos moved beside the Admiral, studying the holographic display. "They're hiding, using the asteroids as cover. Smart move, given what they're facing." Before Morrison could respond, the communications officer called out urgently, "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission on the emergency frequency we used to receive the distress call. It's from the surviving Althean ships, on screen." The main view screen shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at the bridge of an alien vessel. The being addressing them was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes that seemed to hold the weight of terrible loss. Despite the obvious exhaustion and desperation, there was an undeniable dignity in her bearing. "Unknown vessels," the alien spoke, her voice carrying the same melodic quality as the original distress call. "This is High Counselor Zafira of what remains of the Althean Republic. Your ship configurations are unfamiliar to us, but if you have come in response to our calls for aid, I must warn you, retreat immediately. The Void Hunters are beyond anything in our databases. Their numbers are endless, and their hunger for destruction knows no bounds." Admiral Morrison stepped forward, her posture straight and confident despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "High Counselor Zafira? This is Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Human Colonial Fleet. We received your distress call, and we're here to help." The alien's large eyes widened in what might have been surprise. "Humans? I am not familiar with your species. How many ships do you command?" 412 vessels, ma'am." Zephyr's expression shifted to what could only be described as grief. "Admiral Morrison, I appreciate your courage in coming so far to aid strangers, but you do not understand what you face. The Void Hunters destroyed our entire home fleet, over 8,000 ships, accumulated over millennia of technological advancement. Your 400 ships, however bravely commanded, cannot succeed where we have failed." Morrison exchanged glances with Captain Santos before responding. "High Counselor, with respect, you don't know what humans are capable of. We'd like to coordinate with your remaining forces and assess the enemy firsthand." Before Zafira could respond, alarms began sounding throughout both human and Althean ships. The sensor operator's voice cut through the noise with professional urgency. "Admiral, large enemy formation approaching our position." Looks like a scouting swarm, approximately 200 Void Hunter vessels. Morrison's smile was predatory. Perfect. High Counselor, please observe our tactical methods. Captain Santos, signal the fleet formation Delta 7, all ships. Prepare for engagement. Zephyra watched in fascination as the human fleet smoothly transitioned from a loose formation into something that resembled a three-dimensional arrow. The larger ships formed the core, while smaller, faster vessels spread out in aggressive attack patterns that seemed almost organic in their fluidity. Their formation appears unusual, Zephyra observed to her tactical officer, a crystalline being whose species, the Kethver, had been among the first victims of the Void Hunter assault. Most civilized species employ defensive spheres or protective barriers. The Kethver officer, Commander Prism, studied the human deployment with professional interest. High Counselor, their formation appears to be entirely offensive in nature. They're not positioning to defend anything, they're positioning to attack everything. As the Void Hunter scouting force drew closer, the humans got their first clear look at their enemy. The Void Hunter ships were things of alien nightmare, organic-looking vessels that seemed to have been grown rather than built. They moved in perfect synchronization like a school of predatory fish, their black hulls absorbing light and giving them an almost spectral appearance against the starfield. All ships, Admiral Morrison's voice carried across the fleet communications. Remember your briefings. These things operate on hive mind principles. Take out the larger ships first. They're likely command nodes. Show them what Deathworlders do to bullies. The engagement began with a coordinated human missile barrage that lit up space like a second sun. Where most galactic species had developed elegant energy weapons that required charging time and careful aim, humans had perfected the art of throwing large quantities of explosive ordnance very fast and very accurately, the Void Hunter formation. Clearly expecting the defensive tactics they had encountered from other species, flew directly into the wall of missiles without evasive maneuvers. Dozens of the alien ships disappeared in brilliant explosions before they seemed to realize they were facing something different. Fascinating, Zephyra breathed, watching the human attack unfold. They're not trying to minimize casualties or preserve their ships. They're fighting like they're not afraid to die, Commander Prism finished. High Counselor, I've never seen tactics like this. They're using their smaller ships as individual attack units rather than keeping them in protective formation. Indeed, the human destroyers and frigates were breaking off from the main force and engaging the Void Hunters in individual combat. Their tactics resembling aerial dogfights more than traditional space battle. The human pilots flew with a reckless aggression that seemed to completely confuse the hive-minded enemy. Admiral Morrison watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. Santos, are you getting readings on their shield technology? Yes, ma'am. Interesting design. They appear to have excellent protection against energy weapons, but their defensive fields aren't calibrated for kinetic impacts. Our railguns and missiles are punching through like they're not even there. The Void Hunter formation, which had entered the battle with overwhelming numerical superiority, found itself scattered and confused within minutes. The human tactics of aggressive individual action and coordinated group strikes were completely outside their experience. Admiral Morrison, Zephyra's voice came through the communications array, filled with amazement. Your casualties appear to be minimal despite the aggressive nature of your attack. How is this possible? Morrison smiled grimly as she watched another group of Void Hunter ships fall to a coordinated attack by 3 human cruisers. High Counselor, when you evolve on a planet where everything from the weather to the bacteria is trying to kill you, you learn to fight smart, not just hard. Our pilots have been training for combat scenarios since they were children, and our ship designs prioritize maneuverability and firepower over passive defense. The last of the Void Hunter scouting force was eliminated within 20 minutes of the engagement beginning. The human fleet regrouped with minimal damage, a few scoring hits on armor plating, but no ships lost. Commander Prism spoke quietly to Zephyra as they watched the human fleet reform. High Counselor, in 3,000 years of recorded Kethver military history, I have never seen a space engagement concluded so quickly with such disproportionate results. But their amazement was interrupted by urgent sensor readings. The main Void Hunter force was responding to the destruction of their scouts, and they were not pleased. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Chun reported, massive energy spike from the inner system. The entire Void Hunter fleet is moving toward our position. All 3,000 ships. Morrison nodded calmly. Expected. Captain Santos signaled the fleet, all ships to withdraw to grid reference 77 Alpha. We're going to give them a proper introduction to human tactics. As the human fleet began moving toward the asteroid field where the Althean survivors were sheltered, Zephyra opened communications again. Admiral Morrison. With 3,000 enemy ships approaching, surely retreat is the only rational option. You have proven your capabilities, but the numerical disadvantage is insurmountable. Morrison's response carried the confidence of a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain on the most dangerous planet in known space. Hi, Counselor, you're thinking like prey. Humans aren't prey, we're apex predators. And when apex predators face a swarm, they don't run. They find ways to turn the swarm's numbers against itself. The human fleet disappeared into The Breakwater Protocol had been developed during humanity's early colonial expansion, when pirates and raiders had thought Earth's scattered settlements would be easy targets. They had learned the hard way that humans had a unique approach to asymmetrical warfare. Instead of trying to match superior numbers, they changed the rules of engagement entirely. Admiral Morrison watched with cold satisfaction as her fleet began implementing the protocol throughout the asteroid field. Each human ship became the center of its own localized storm of destruction, using the asteroids not as cover, but as weapons. High Counselor, Morrison spoke into the communications array. You might want to observe this carefully. You're about to see why the galaxy should be thankful that humans are on your side. The first indication that the Void Hunters were facing something unprecedented came when the human destroyer UES Wolverine deliberately rammed a small asteroid into a cluster of enemy ships, then used the debris cloud as cover to launch a devastating missile barrage from point-blank range. What had seemed like a suicidal maneuver resulted in the destruction of 12 Void Hunter vessels, while the human ship emerged with only minor hull scoring. Impossible, breathed Commander Prism, watching the tactical display in amazement. They're using debris as both concealment and additional projectile mass. No civilized species fights like this. High Counselor Zephyra was beginning to understand why the humans had seemed so confident despite the overwhelming odds. Commander, I believe we have been thinking about this incorrectly. They are not fighting a space battle as we understand it. They are hunting. Indeed, the human fleet had transformed the asteroid field into a three-dimensional maze, where every piece of rock became part of an elaborate trap. The Void Hunter ships, designed for overwhelming frontal assault, found themselves separated and surrounded, their hive-mind coordination disrupted by the complex terrain and the humans' deliberate targeting of what appeared to be command nodes. Captain Maria Santos, monitoring the battle from the bridge of the Defiance, called out tactical updates with professional efficiency. Admiral Wolverine reports successful termination of a hive cluster. The Void Hunters in Sector 7 appear to be operating on autonomous programming now. Excellent! Signal all ships, Phase 2 of Breakwater. Time to show them what happens when you separate pack hunters. Across the human fleet, small groups of ships began coordinating attacks with a precision that seemed almost telepathic. Unlike the Void Hunters' hive mind control, human coordination came from years of training together, shared understanding of tactics, and the intuitive cooperation that had allowed their species to survive on their death world. Lieutenant Commander Chun suddenly straightened at his station. Admiral, I'm detecting something unusual. The Void Hunter ships aren't just losing coordination, they're starting to panic. Individual vessels are breaking formation and attempting to flee. Morrison's smile was grim with satisfaction. That's because they've never faced prey that fights back this effectively. Their entire strategy is based on overwhelming force and psychological intimidation. When that fails, they don't have a backup plan. The human cruiser used Thunderchild demonstrated this perfectly as it pursued a fleeing, Void Hunter vessel through a dense cluster of asteroids. Instead of the straightforward pursuit the alien ship expected, the human captain used the gravitational fields of the larger rocks to slingshot his ship into an impossible intercept course, destroying the enemy vessel with a perfectly timed broadside. "Admiral Morrison," Zephyr's voice carried a note of awe, "your tactical methods are unlike anything in our historical databases. How do your captains coordinate such complex maneuvers without central command control?" "High Counselor, when you grow up on a planet where cooperation means survival and failure means death, you learn to work together instinctively. Every human captain has spent years in simulation training, but more importantly, they understand their fellow humans well enough to predict their actions." The battle raged for 2 more hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt once the human tactics began taking effect. The Void Hunter fleet, which had conquered dozens of civilizations through sheer overwhelming force, found itself facing an enemy that used their numbers against them. The human strategy was brutally simple and devastatingly effective. Instead of trying to fight 3,000 ships at once, they had divided the battlefield into dozens of smaller engagements where human tactical superiority and individual initiative could overcome numerical disadvantage. The asteroid field became a maze of ambush and traps, with human ships appearing from concealment, striking hard, and disappearing before the Void Hunters could coordinate a response. "Status report," Morrison commanded as the tide of battle clearly turned in humanity's favor. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Chun responded, "enemy fleet strength is down to approximately 800 vessels and falling. Many of the survivors appear to be attempting to retreat from the system entirely." Captain Santos studied the tactical display with professional satisfaction. "Admiral, we're seeing something remarkable here. The Void Hunter hive mind appears to have a critical flaw. When they lose a certain percentage of command nodes, the remaining ships default to individual survival protocols. They're no longer fighting as a coordinated force?" Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "That explains how they conquered so many civilizations. Most species would surrender or retreat when faced with overwhelming numbers. They've never encountered an enemy willing to take casualties to test their limits." High Counselor Zafira had been quietly observing the human tactical methods, and her growing understanding of their approach filled her with both admiration and a certain degree of unease. These humans fought with a combination of technological sophistication and primitive aggression that was unlike anything in galactic civilization. "Commander Prism," she spoke quietly to her tactical officer, "analyze the human casualty reports." The crystalline being studied the data feeds from the human fleet with increasing amazement. "High Counselor, their losses are remarkably minimal. 17 ships with significant damage, but no total losses. Their tactical doctrine appears to emphasize aggressive action while minimizing actual risk through superior positioning and timing." "They fight like apex predators," Zafira observed. "Efficient, coordinated, and utterly without fear when protecting their pack." The final phase of the battle came when Admiral Morrison implemented the last component of the Breakwater Protocol. The remaining Void Hunter ships, now operating on individual survival instincts rather than hive coordination, attempted to flee the system. But the humans had anticipated this. "All ships," Morrison's voice carried across the fleet communications, "execute closing maneuvers. Don't let any of them escape to report our capabilities to other Void Hunter fleets." What followed was not so much a battle as a carefully orchestrated hunting expedition. Human ships, working in coordinated groups, systematically tracked down and eliminated the fleeing Void Hunter vessels with methodical efficiency. The faster human ships herded the enemy back toward the main force, while the heavier vessels waited in ambush. Within 6 hours of the first engagement, the system was clear of Void Hunter ships. 3,000 enemy vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris, while the human fleet remained largely intact. "High Counselor Zafira," Admiral Morrison's voice came through the communications array, The system is secure. Are your people in need of immediate medical assistance? The Althean leader took a moment to compose herself before responding. She had witnessed something that challenged everything her peaceful civilization understood about warfare and conflict resolution. Admiral Morrison, we are in your debt beyond measure. What you have accomplished here defies every tactical analysis we might have predicted. How is it possible that your relatively small force succeeded where our much larger fleet failed? Morrison's response carried both pride and a note of sadness. High Counselor, your civilization developed on what our xenobiologists call a garden world. You evolved in an environment that rewarded cooperation, intellectual development, and peaceful coexistence. Those are admirable qualities that we respect greatly. She paused. Looking out at the debris field that had once been an overwhelming enemy force, humanity evolved on what the galaxy has begun to call a death world. Every single day of our species' development was a struggle for survival against an environment that was actively trying to kill us. We learned to cooperate because isolation meant death. We learned to fight because everything else on our planet was trying to eat us. We learned to protect the innocent because without that instinct, we would have gone extinct millions of years ago. Commander Prism spoke quietly to Zafira as they absorbed the implications of Morrison's words. High Counselor, they are not more advanced than us technologically. They are more dangerous than us evolutionarily. Over the following days, as human medical ships assisted in treating Void Hunter, attack survivors and human engineering teams helped repair damaged Althean vessels. The broader implications of the battle became clear. The Void Hunters had been a plague upon the galaxy for generations, their overwhelming numerical superiority allowing them to destroy civilizations that had stood